Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the RiskWire webcast. My name is Daniela Wabdi, and here I have Eric Fox with me, Chief Economist at Veris Real Estate Solutions. So, my first question will be that people often compare current housing market to that of the Great Recession in 2007 to 2009. But in your article that you state that it is not the same. What are the differences?
Well, that's a big misconception that it's very similar. And in fact, I see lots of people forecasting that house prices are going to go down, we're going to be in another housing recession. And yet, when we look at the data, it's nothing like that. In 2007 to 2009, we had very lax lending standards, which led to huge numbers of foreclosures and a resulting large supply of homes. Today, we don't have that at all. We have very sound lending standards. Foreclosures are very low, and the supply of homes is also very low. So as a result, we really don't have anything right now resembling the Great Recession of 2007, 2008.
Okay, very interesting. So our second question is going to be, in your article, you compare U.S. housing to European housing. What's the biggest difference between the two?
Well, I think that's one common thing that is going to potentially change here in the United States. When you look at Europe, the square footage that they live in is much smaller. People sometimes ask me, Eric, how long can this keep going? Prices are high, affordability keeps getting worse. How can we possibly ever break out of this? Because prices have to go down. Incomes are not rising as quickly as house prices are rising. So some way, somehow, we have to break out. And my comment always is, well, Europe never did. Europe has always been much more expensive than the US. Incomes are lower, and yet they seem to survive just fine with house prices going up and up. In fact, the United States, when you look at our house prices, are some of the least expensive in the entire world. So one way that Europeans, as an example, are able to cope with this, for lack of a better word, is that they live in much smaller square footage homes than those of us here in the United States. Here in the United States, the average house is about 2,160 square feet. In France, it's 1,200 square feet. And in the United Kingdom, it's 800 square feet. So they live in far smaller houses than we do. And you might say, well, maybe when we adjust that for, number of square foot per person, it changes. Well, actually, it stays about the same. In the United States, that's a little over 800 square feet per person. In France, it's a little over 400 square feet per person. And in Great Britain, it's about 350 square feet per person. So as a result, I think that's one of the things we're going to start to see as we move forward, is that people will start in the United States living in smaller homes. And that's maybe something that we should expect to see as a new normal in the future.
Yeah, and I feel like someone like me who's been looking into purchasing a home, I think the trend that I've been seeing is that the square footage has gotten smaller, whereas the prices have increased.
And that's an interesting comment. If we just look at the last decade here in the United States for new home construction, a decade ago, average square footage was 2,500 square feet. Today, as I mentioned, it's a little over 2,100 square feet. So we're seeing that trend start to happen already.
Yeah, definitely. A little while ago, we spoke about a lock-in effect where home buyers are reluctant to sell their homes because they had purchased at about a 3% mortgage rate. Whereas now they don't want to sell their homes because they would have to opt for buying a house at a little bit of a higher rate. Now that 60% of houses are about less than 4% mortgage rate, do you think that lock-in effect is going to soften?
I don't think we're going to see it soften anytime soon. And the primary reason is what you just said, 4% or less, that's 60% of the mortgages in the United States today. That's a lot. If we look at the current mortgage interest rates, they're above 6%. So we're essentially asking those folks to forego their 3.5% or 4% mortgage rate to buy another house at 6.5%.
Yeah.
Well, not a lot of people are willing to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of folks are just saying, we're not willing to relocate just to get one more bedroom, one less bedroom. We'll be happy with what we have at our low mortgage rate. And that's what we're seeing a lot of people doing. which is keeping the normal supply of homes on the market very low. And that's one reason why we're keep having those stubbornly high prices, because we don't have the usual supply of homes that we would normally have in a market like this.
Definitely. I read in a recent article that home buyers are waiting for the election to be over in order to make a move. What's your best advice for those people who believe that the election has an effect on the housing market?
I really don't think that's a huge impact, honestly. Yeah, people could argue one of the candidates may have slightly different policy than the other, but at the end of the day, housing is about supply and demand. So I wouldn't, if you're interested in the market, I wouldn't wait until after the election. I think it's just fine either way.
Okay, great insights. And my last question is, what's your best advice for someone like me around my age, let's say in our 20s, who is looking to buy a house for the first time?
Well, I always recommend folks should always buy a house as soon as they can, buy something that you can afford, and then start building equity. And that is going to be the best long-term savings that anybody could do. And the reason is all of the tax benefits with the deductibility of mortgage interest. You're paying rent anyway, and that's not deductible. So you just start building equity and wealth at an early age. And everybody who does that 30 or 40 years from now, it's a huge advantage.
Definitely. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you letting me interview you for this webcast.
All right. Well, thank you, Danielle, very much.
Of course. Okay. So we'll see you guys on the next webcast. Thank you so much for tuning in.